Good morning, everybody, and it's always a pleasure to talk about my passion, which is boating and the marine industry. And I want to acknowledge Robert, who's put a huge amount of service and time into our organisation, particularly Chairman of the Finance and Remuneration Committee, I think for 4 years now, of the association. So the different names, the Boating Industries Association, which is our entity, was formed nearly 60 years ago, and we trade under different names: Marine Industry Association, Superyachts New Zealand, sister organisation NZ Marine Export Group, and the training organisation Marine and Specialised Technologies, which I'll talk a little bit about shortly. But boating's a way of life for a lot of New Zealanders and Aucklanders. So how many of you have been boating in the past or own a boat? Right, well, I'm talking to a very convinced audience. That's a good start. So what I'd like to do is just briefly go through the size of the marine industry and what it provides to the New Zealand economy. Very sophisticated little Zappi here. So we've just done an analysis of the industry. This is to 31st of March this year for the 12-month period, and we cracked the $3 billion turnover, which is pretty similar to the previous year, $2.9 billion. So as you can see, it's quite a large industry, and in fact we believe it's the largest manufacturing industry in New Zealand. Government figures of manufacturing includes any packaged product, so it includes packaged meat, for example, and they hide the real manufacturing which we're involved with. But I'll take out the meat and agricultural sector. We're certainly one of the largest, if not the largest. And you can see that growth from 2005, 1.5 billion. We've doubled that over the last 15 years.
Peter, excuse me, does that include imported stuff that's retailed, or it's just New Zealand production?
This will be total turnover, which will include imported product as well, which is only a small percentage of the market actually, which I can talk about that as well. So with those figures, 800 million is exported, 2.2 is the local turnover. And the exports have stopped their growth over the last 3 years due to the pandemic. Sales managers weren't able to leave New Zealand to sell their product, and customers weren't allowed to come to New Zealand. So there's been a bit of a challenge for that sector. We're probably the last country off the block to be able to sell to the world again, and we're in full flight at the moment. But you can see the increase in the domestic. From the previous slide, domestic is up about 40% over the pandemic as everyone decided to go boating, which was great, and they did that worldwide actually. About half of that turnover is in the boat building related sectors, so it's a key part of the industry and in exports. And one part of that boat building, a lot of you might be able to relate to, is trailer powerboats. Down the road we've got Haynes Hunter at Pakaranga's Ray Glass, and they are two of about 100 boat builders in New Zealand that manufacture trailer powerboats. So we're very proud of that part of the market. Continues to grow, as you can see there, and we're quite unique because 90% of the trailer powerboat sales in New Zealand, the boats are made in New Zealand. And the only other country that has got similar figures is the United States of America, which actually represents about 50% of the world's consumption of boats in total. So the New Zealand product is well known by the local market. We are really at the BMW, Mercedes end of the market. You can buy an import for 25% less, but we've still got 90% market share. So there's a culture of understanding that a New Zealand made boat is a quality boat. The stainless steel will still look shiny in 10 years time, and it can take you out into the Hauraki Gulf and the choppy conditions that we do get. So the total number of trailer powerboats is about 5,000. Now that does include smaller boats as well. Anything that can take a 15 horsepower upward motor, it might be a bit inflatable, up to an 8 metre, $500,000 large trailer powerboat. You can see the larger boats there up to 12 metres, 224 in production or sold last year. 12 to 24 metres, 70, and 4 super yachts were delivered from New Zealand the 31st of March. We don't have boat registration in New Zealand. I can answer any questions regarding that. I sit on the committee that sets the rules for navigation and rules for New Zealand. Without registration, it's hard actually to track exact numbers, so we use other information, and new boat trailer registrations is a very good one. So when you register a trailer, there's a portion in there you're going to say what's it going to be used for, and if it's a horse float, you write on horse float, and if it's a boat trailer, then you put on boat. So it's pretty conclusive information. And you can see there that through the boom times of the pandemic was up to 12,000 new boat trailers were released into New Zealand, and that's up on the previous average of 8,000 or 9,000 going forward. Now, looking at the current situation, those figures were to December last year, those particular ones, but we're tracking this on a regular basis, and probably no surprises, but it's a bit daunting, that the new boat trailers registered from January to the 30th of June this year are down 29% on the same period last year. So the Reserve Bank is certainly having its effect. Probably the marine industry is the first industry that's going to reflect any downturn in the market, because unfortunately you do not have to own a boat or buy a new one, and people have stopped buying to a certain extent, and we're down 30% year to date. So I think you'll see that go through the whole economy. We're normally 6 months ahead of any other figures going through previous data. So certainly it's really cooled off in the last 6 months. Imports of outboard motors is another good gauge. And to December last year, it was a record year with 13,000 outboard motors imported into New Zealand. That's a record going back to the 1960s. And again, I don't think I've got a slide on it, but the 6 months to date, they're off about 25% year to date. So we'll see a decline as the market is cooling off. But one good thing about the pandemic, if there is one good thing, is that people appreciated getting out into nature, out on the water, and enjoying life. Reconnecting with family and friends was very important, and continually is. And nearly 2 million people go boating each year in New Zealand. So it is by far the largest, most popular recreational activity in New Zealand, by more than double of the next one of golf, walking, jogging, and rugby. That boating is twice as popular as any of those other activities. So that bodes well for our future, as the young people appreciate getting out on the water, and the health it provides, just being the free air and either the lakes or the salt water. But the weather did play a part, unfortunately, in the activity in the last 6 months. And this is evidenced by Coast Guard call-outs. They normally do 4,000 call-outs per annum. They do a great job. In January to March this year, that reduced by 33%, as people took note of the weather and they didn't go boating or couldn't go boating. So hopefully becoming spring and summer will be better than that. So in summary, there's nearly 2 million people go boating, a $3 billion industry. We've got 520 member companies in our trade organisation, and we've got 650 apprentices for our training operation. So I just want to, just a few minutes just to go through some of the key sectors of the industry that make it up, because it's very diverse. This is for the trailer powerboat market, which I talked about before. We've got a program, an audited boatbuilding standard. So it's self-regulation, it's not government, and there's a boatbuilding audited program that we sign up companies to. And we actually put an auditor on each of those companies at least once a year to make sure they're building their boats to that audited program. So it's tougher than CE, it's tougher than any other world boat building standard, because we actually check up on the boat builder to make sure they're actually building it to the standard. They've got to have engineered approved drawings for the boat they're building, and the fuel systems, the electrical systems, all have to have design drawings all signed off, and they're going to be building their boats to their performance criteria. So we've got another one this week, so we've got 24 manufacturers that comply to this build standard, and they have that plate called the CPC plate, Compliance Plate Code, as the serial number plate. And it's endorsed by Coast Guard. It's the only thing that Coast Guard endorse. They don't endorse a life jacket or whatsoever. The CEO of Coast Guard sits on that committee, and it's a joint program between New Zealand Marine Industry and Coast Guard, which is working really well. And it has the benefit of the manufacturers actually getting together to talk about safety, compliance, about training. So now it's rivals working together, and it's really caused quite a respectfulness throughout the industry. So they're not putting down the opposition, they're just promoting their own features and benefits rather than putting the dagger into their co-worker down the road. And I think it's been one of the reasons for the success of this trailer powerboat sector of the industry working together, and now they're exporting a lot, as well as having 90% market share of the New Zealand market. Another big area which people don't really realise is that we make these boats. The commercial boat sector is 50% of the boat building sector in New Zealand, and anything up to a couple of 100 feet, and for ferries, pilot vessels, police boats, and indeed the Auckland ferry situation, which is, as you understand, is going through problems. Currently there are 4 ferries being built in New Zealand, ready to go into the Auckland scene. These electric ferries are purely electric. They'll be doing the Pine Harbour, West Park, Birkenhead run. These are currently in production at Macmillan and Wing in Mount Wellington. I was out there the other day seeing them being built using America's Cup technology, light carbon fibre, and they'll handle 200 people. I believe it's got a 5-minute charging turnaround. The size of the plugs that plug in are about that size for the charging units to get the 5-minute charging at the wharfs that they call into. The top ferry is being built in Whanganui at Q West. These are larger ferries. They'll actually be used for the Devonport city run. I think it's about 400 people that they can handle. They're actually a hybrid, but on the ferry run between Devonport and the ferry building in Auckland, they'll be using electric. But if they need to go out to Waiheke or Great Barrier, then they can, and they can put the diesel back into the system. All these ferries are powered. Propulsion is Hamilton Jet, one of our member companies in Christchurch, our largest member. They employ 500 people, export $130 million a year, and it's great to see the technology we used on Auckland's harbour. The bottom ferry is the current east-west ferry in Wellington. It was built in Wellington and has been running now for 18 months, one of the world's first electric-only ferries. So we are to the fore in New Zealand on the design and new innovation technology and building ferries, from the composite construction, America's Cup construction, right through to the propulsion unit designed and made in Christchurch. Another area, Robert touched on this I think before, is that super yachts now, people think, oh, it's nice and glamorous to be working in this super yacht industry, and we find it quite difficult to get government and councils over the line because they have a bit of a tall poppy syndrome. Why do we need these sort of rich pricks coming in? Well, actually, we like them coming in because they support the employment of blue-collar workers, apprenticeships, and the economy. So just to give you an example, a super yacht coming into New Zealand will spend between $3 million and $6 million. So the $6 million is equivalent economic gain of having 2,000 Australian tourists come to New Zealand. So an Australian tourist brings in $3,000 each. A super yacht comes in with 15 people normally, and they spend the amount of gain to the economy is the same as between 1,000 and 2,000 Australian tourists coming to New Zealand per super yacht. So you can see the numbers here. The America's Cup had a huge influence. We had 5 super yachts visit New Zealand before the America's Cup in the year 2000, then we had 96, and of course the whole Viaduct Harbour was built. They bypassed the legislation for Resource Management Act was bypassed, and they built the Viaduct Harbour within 2 years, and that was an example of what New Zealand can do if they put their minds to it. So I think we've left a legacy of a great downtown Auckland with all those restaurants and the Viaduct and now the new Jellicoe Harbour. We had 150 super yachts booked in for the last America's Cup, but of course the pandemic, they had to turn around and go back home. We saw them a lot on the computer screens where they're coming through Tahiti and all the AIS, they trash these boats, and they're all heading back to Europe or the Caribbean, so it was very, very disappointing. And we're coming off a low base again of about 10 boats. So that's why we've got a mission to promote New Zealand. We're open and you're welcome to come back. And my board have set a goal of 60 super yachts by 2024. Hence we're doing promotions internationally to say that we're open and you're welcome to come back again. And that's part of the promotion is, actually when we promote New Zealand, we don't promote the marine industry, we promote New Zealand as a destination. or the golf courses, the wineries, the fishing and the cruising. It costs on average $750,000 for a super yacht to sell to New Zealand, and they can have a service to the Mediterranean or in the United States, but they come here because the owner wants to spend a week or two cruising New Zealand or seeing the sights. And it's the captain that realises that we've got the infrastructure to do the servicing and maintenance in New Zealand whilst the boat's here. So we're actually a byproduct of selling New Zealand at the highest level, all the lodges and the like. On average, each super yacht brings in one corporate private jet, so the gain to the economy is huge. Now, interestingly enough, just for this, yeah, it does work. Oops. Go back. I'm losing it here. So I might just want to reset that up. Sorry about that. That one back. So, for information, all these boats, they cruise through the Panama Canal. They don't come through the Suez Canal because of the pirates, believe it or not, so you don't hear about much, but the boats lose the insurance. If they come through the Suez Canal, they'll take all the women crew off and put security guards on the boat because of the real risk of pirates. So 99% of the boats always come through the Caribbean, come through Tahiti into New Zealand or Australia, and then they go back the same way that they came. So to make all this happen, you need skilled staff, and you read and understood the shortages in this area over the last few years. Well, fortunately, we own our own training organisation, and we've been given an exemption from the government's tertiary education amalgamation of all polytechnics industry training organisations into Te Ponga. We're the one industry that's been given an exemption to continue to do our own thing. And that organisation has been very successful, a training organisation of bringing trainee numbers up from 50 in the 1990s to an average of 650 present day. We've got 300 companies that have apprentices in our program. So with assistance of our industry, we actually write the curriculum, set the qualifications, and then assist the employers do the training, mostly on the job. A lot of electronic workbooks, and we have field officers that call on each apprentice every 2 or 3 months to mentor them, counsel them, and provide them the employer support for the training. It's a system that works really, really well, and we're very, very proud of it. So it recently changed its name to Marine and Specialised Technology. It's been set up as a private training establishment. And another string to the bow is that we work closely with the secondary schools, and we've got a program that years 12 and 13, that's 5th and 6th and 7th formers in old terms. They can work 1 day a week in a boat building yard, and they get paid for that day. Any work they do can be credited to the NCEA at school, and the next 4 days they put the school uniform on and go back to school. After 3 months, if it's really working, they work 2 days in industry, getting paid for it, and go back to school for 3 days. They've got to apply for the job, so you might have several students that are actually writing to Lloyd Stevenson or Ray Glass, whoever it is, and say, look, you know, I go fishing, I'm the captain of the rugby team, or I play netball, and I'm keen to actually see what this industry is all about. And so they've really got life experience of having to write out a CV and apply for those roles, and it's working exceptionally well. We put it through about 50 young people a year, and 90% of them get snapped up by the industry, so it's a very good process. Now, when super yachts come to New Zealand, what's the advantage of having work done in New Zealand? So this is an example at Orams Marine, just down the road, of a super yacht owner having the deck refreshed on his yacht, and then we return it to him complete with a new trailer powerboat, which has been made to size to fit on the foredeck. And the interior of that boat, the interior needed a refresher according to the wife of the owner, and so you know, $4 million later we return it to the owner like that. And that's the example of the level of skills you need in that market. And finally, other areas that we're involved with is promoting boating. We've looked around the room before, a lot of you have been involved in boating. We play a role in that in running the Auckland Boat Show. That's the one on the waterfront in the Viaduct Harbour. We had one this year after a few being cancelled because of COVID, and next year we're going to be in the same general location but we're moving back into the Viaduct Event Centre. This is the Viaduct Event Centre where Emirates Team New Zealand have been for the last 5 years. There, Emirates Team New Zealand is probably aware of moved to Ineos syndicate base, and we're getting the Viaduct Event Centre back for a boat show, and this is the water space that we'll be utilising for the show next March. Be pretty exciting. We've got government and Auckland Council support. After the FIFA World Cup finishes, New Zealand does not have any major international events or sporting events, and they've identified that the marine industry and sailing and everything going with the water is a major advantage to Auckland, and so they're providing support for this. And Sail GP, that great yacht racing tournament, will be held 3 days after the conclusion of the boat show in March next year. So it'll be a big grand event, and hopefully, well, it will be ongoing in 2025, which we're already working on. So hope to see some of you there. I've talked through some of the activities of the Marine Industry Association. We do a lot of representation to government to make it easy to build boats and to preserve the waterfront areas for shipbuilding and refit and the like. And last week we had a conference in Tauranga which was looking at what boating and the marine industry will look like in the 2030s. So we had all the pioneers with the electrification, foiling, with the release of a new 200 horsepower electric upward motor that's being designed in Whangarei and be built in Whangarei, and that builder hopes to be the largest supplier of electric upward motors in the world by 2030. He's not kidding, he employs 500 people at the moment, and so that's great to see New Zealand to the fore in pioneering another part of the marine industry. So about 15 years ago, when we were setting up, promoting the marine industry, we weren't that well known, and we had a campaign going back then that we wanted to be like this. Watches are known to the Swiss, French, champagne to France, and we wanted New Zealand known for boats. So I think we've gone a long way of getting there the last 15 years, and with people going boating as regularly as they are, I think there's no reason to believe that we won't continue to be a major manufacturing unit in New Zealand. Thank you.
So just before you step down there, thanks. Questions?
Peter,
Yes.
with the sort of anecdotal evidence of sort of accidents and death in older craft in New Zealand, do you see a time, or do you see a way that we could get either registrations or checks, warrants of fitness on older vessels so that they're not killing?
Yeah, well, I think any legislation should be based on the facts of what the problem is, and whether any implementation of regulation will actually improve the situation. And from the analysis that we've done, we don't think that registration of boats will achieve that. We've looked at registration regimes in other countries and what it's achieved, and it actually hasn't achieved anything apart from providing more business for finance companies and insurance companies. They feel happy they've got a number on the boat that they're actually insuring or financing. But it doesn't save lives. Most lives in New Zealand that are lost in the waterways are in boats under 4 metres. So if registration was to work, then you'd register every canoe and every dinghy, and with the Maori boy going out in Matamata or from Beachlands or something, go and set his net, you'd have to charge him $150 a year to register his dinghy, if registration was a correlation to saving lives. So I firmly believe it doesn't, and we don't really have a problem in that area. But normally someone asks that question, the second question is, what about boat licensing? And I do think there's an application to having some basic requirement to pass a test if you're going to be in control of a boat that's capable of more than 10 knots. And so we're currently looking around the world at different models. And I think Australia and New South Wales are quite a good model. It could be improved upon. It's pretty basic. You just go online and you've got to sit this test. You could have the book of answers alongside you, but you've actually got to read up that you can't go more than 5 knots, 200 metres from land, and what a dive flag looks like, and what side to pass a boat if you're approaching a boat. And so I think that process that New South Wales does, we should look at that, because there's a lot of new immigrants coming to New Zealand that haven't been brought up in boats, and to know if you've got a boat that's doing 20 knots out there, the other person understands the rules, I think would be good. So we're sort of leaning on the licensing rather than the boat registration. So, good question.
You're saying 150 superyachts in America's Cup who are going to come. Where are they going to go?
Yeah, well, it would have been a problem, which would have been pleased to deal with. We had arranged for the harbour master to have mooring areas, like from Manawa Bay, and Waiheke was a big one, and Oneroa and Rakino and different places. We had all organised where they could go. 100 of them could have stayed on marinas in the Viaduct and Silo Marina and the new Jellicoe port. It would have been a handful, I admit. Now we've gone the other way. We're the only developed country in the world that's got spare super yacht berths available. So we've got no, in the Jellicoe Harbour, we're Team New Zealand, we're sort of vacant harbour, and around where Orams are, yeah, we've got super yacht berths available, which is unheard of worldwide. So there is some capacity there at the moment. Never for 150, but yeah.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. To give thanks